Welcome back to RFL. Quick update to our top story. Word just in that Mayor Bill de Blasio in New York is going to meet with police unions tomorrow. That meeting will be behind closed doors, and Police Commissioner Bill Bratton will be in attendance as well. More coverage on that tomorrow night at 6 on RFL.
They clearly have been watching the show,
right?
Decided let's get together.
All of a sudden, the panel made sense, and they're like, let's put this into motion. All right, now to the biggest regional headline that you might have missed over the long holiday weekend. The dual veto of a two-state bill that would have brought major reforms to the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. It happened Saturday night in the middle of Christmas weekend in what might be the quietest news period of the year. Both New Jersey Governor Christie and New York Governor Andrew Cuomo issued vetoes, and here's the rub. Both bills passed their separate legislatures unanimously, with more than 600 yes votes in total. And with the legislative session ending in New York and Democrats in New Jersey lacking the votes for an override on their own, nobody thinks an override is possible, despite the unanimous votes of the initial bills. The bills were designed to try to tamp down the political patronage of the Port Authority and reduce the powers that both governors hold over the PA, remaking its daily operations, creating new rules over PA finances, ethics, and administration, opening meetings to the public, and forcing commissioners to acknowledge a fiduciary duty to the authority. This veto comes, of course, as investigations continue over the Bridgegate lane closures at the GWB, and as the authority raises tolls on the Hudson crossings again, now to $14
I have to sit next to him.
in an effort to offset some of the stunning costs at the World Trade Center.
Can you move me?
$4 billion. I'm just gonna read through. $4 billion to build one World Trade Center, another $4 billion and counting to build the train station at the World Trade Center. Brodsky has been pushing for authorities reform since the Earth first cooled.
Because of him.
So we'll get to Richard in a second. Tom, other than personal and political power from the two governors who have a lot of influence over what the PA does and how they do it, what's the rationale behind the vetoes?
They clearly had their own committee that had come up with some other reforms. I guess the governors felt like having the legislature sort of dictate to them those reforms were not in their best interest. And quite frankly, we elected them governor, and if the legislature wants to feel so pound their chest of it, override them. I mean, that's a very simple. If this has such unanimous support within the legislature, they should go and override their prospective governors.
For George Pataki, and I was running a committee investigating state authorities. I found him at the door of the Thruway Authority with a list of written orders. Am I getting this wrong?
Richard has told this story 30 times.
Well, I haven't heard it,
and I'll say it for the 31st time. His story is completely wrong. Okay. He has confused me with somebody else.
Well, what's the story?
I don't know.
He was the governor's emissary to the Thruway Authority, telling them what to do. Now, that's not legal or good practice. The bills that the legislature passed...
But apologize, because that's just not true. I was in charge of personnel. I never, in the 8 years I worked for the governor of New York, ever was involved in any policy decisions.
Bill has passed away.
But
that's
not true, though.
There's a point here.
Yeah.
And the point
is
that the heads of these authorities have a duty to do the right thing, not to take orders. And the heart of the bill that the legislature's enacted, created this fiduciary duty, this legal term, which means you can't follow orders, you got to do what you think is right. Now that sounds simple and obvious, but it hasn't been the way the Port Authority functions. And so you ended up with excessive tolls being imposed, you ended up with a real estate deal that went bad. Those are the kind of things the legislatures were trying to fix. The governors vetoed this because it constricted their power to order people around, and it's the wrong thing to do.
Let me get this straight. So the governor of both New York and New Jersey, in New York you appoint the executive director. In New Jersey they appoint the chairman of the board. It is then up to them to carry out the wishes of the governors of New York and New Jersey who appoint them. Richard, that is the way
that's
that...
like saying you appoint a judge to the Court of Appeals whose job it is to do the governor's bidding.
That is completely different. We elect judges. The point is that in this particular case, I mean, look, if you think whether it's the Thruway Authority, whether it's the Bridge Authority, or wherever it may be, that you appoint people who you believe will carry out your way because you were elected to carry out that particular way.
That's not what an authority is.
Oh, come on.
That's what a department of the government is.
Then you know what you should do? Then what you should have done was just abolish any appointments to boards, et cetera, get rid of all of them, and then you would have redone the whole exact thing.
Well, let me just ask this question in between this
Go ahead.
little conversation here.
Quick.
Okay, I'll make it quick. What about the fact that the Port Authority, and each of you can disagree because I really don't care, has been one of the biggest patronage mills for each governor? What about that?
Dominic, I would like to take liberty with this, is because of the fact that
With the patronage?
Because having done the patronage,
Right.
quote unquote, office for the governor of New York, I got a handful of jobs out of the Port Authority. So where all this patronage was, I don't know, and I don't know to this day. There was a handful
Okay,
of patronage
they
jobs at the Port
appointed
Authority.
somebody after he left.
That is, Dominic, the bottom line is you would be shocked at how many patronage jobs are at the Port Authority. Historically, you would be
patronage.
shocked at
It's one
it.
of the biggest patronage
you're
mills. You
right.
put your
You keep
cousin,
saying-
you put your cousin,
you keep saying
you
that.
put your uncle,
You keep
you put your
saying-
best friend,
you
you
keep
put your
saying
campaign
that.
manager.
That's
They all
not
go on the
true.
payroll.
These bills were intended to make that at least
Right,
more difficult.
right.
And the reason the
not
governors
true.
vetoed it
It's not
is because
true.
they want that.
And are
power.
you
not-
referring to the
it's
two
not-
governors
it's
that
not
recently
true.
had dinner together?
It's not true.
Are those two governors?
Why should
Christie
they?
and Cuomo?
They have issues that they have to work on. Do you not want them talking?
So we don't find it odd that they have a private dinner and then all of a sudden they come out and
Saturday
say,
night of Christmas weekend?
That's odd.
When's the last time he vetoed a bill?
That's odd
The
that they-
Saturday night of
Well,
Christmas
listen,
weekend.
the timing of it, as you know, is political, but the point is that having the two governors get together and have
They
dinner together,
couldn't
and this idea that
defend
it's
it
some patronage
on
mill
a-
like thousands of people, that's
Quickly,
ridiculous.
both governors are pointing to some recommendations of their own. They had a panel.
Right.
They wanted a
Nonsense.
single chief executive of
They're
the Port
talking about
Authority.
guidelines, not laws. And if you don't have law, change in law, you're going to have the same nonsense 6 months from now.
Ask Richard if his Democratic friends in the New York State Assembly will override the governor. Ask him that question.
hope so.
Will
Ask
they?
him-
Why don't you go on tonight, make calls to all 110 of them, and tell them, listen, as a former member of your
I hereby urge them to override. Will you do the same to the Republicans?
Sure,
They're
override.
not,
Go ahead,
they're not
sure.
going to. Shelley Silver's office has already said they're not going to.
Of course they won't.
Because
But it's
they're
such
not
a
coming back
it's-
by the end of the year.
But it's such a good piece of legislation that they can't get their rear ends
They're
back
not
to Albany.
coming back by the
They
end of the
could
year.
Hey,
if
I
they
know
were so
Andrew's got to
important.
move
Dominic?
on, but do you guys like each other?
I like Richard.
Oh, you do?
He accuses me of
Wait,
something
he
that
didn't
just isn't
answer.
true.
He
I don't
didn't
care if he
answer.
does or not.
I'll get back to you.
Oh, okay. Okay, you get back to me.
Up next on RFL, Jeb Bush tweets, then rockets to a double-digit lead in the GOP polls for 2016. 20 Republicans have led the polls in the last 3 cycles. Why so many? We'll discuss next.